Dreaming of the big leagues? As a small and medium-sized business lawyer, I'm here to tell you why maybe you should keep your aspirations small. Focused on small business, that is. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Pamela Metani. I am the owner and founder here at Graphene Business Law, a law firm focused on providing virtual business law services to entrepreneurs throughout the province of Ontario, Canada. If you are new to our YouTube channel, you'll note that we post free educational content every week. So show us some love, give this video a big thumbs up, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button down below. And of course, share any thoughts you might have in the comments. Now, when I started my career, I always, by the way, knew I wanted to have my own law firm. And I always knew when I graduated, in Canada we have something called articling. It's a mandatory 10-month practical or internship program that is required of us in order to be able to practice as lawyers one day. So how it works is you do the 3 years of law school, and then you do basically a year of articling. You get called to the bars. There's 2 of them here, barrister and solicitor, and then you start your practice. So I always knew I wanted to have my own law firm, call my own shots. So that's naturally a small business type of setting. But I also importantly knew that I wanted to acquire my articling training in a small law firm setting as well, because I'd heard that it's a much more quality, much more rigorous way to practice, or to do articling, so to speak, to learn. You're not just like one of 30 articling students at a big law firm looking at one paragraph. You are given the entire agreement on day 1. Day 4 of my articles, I was in court by myself. So that kind of quality, that depth that goes into the small business setting, a small law firm is a small business, always caught my attention. And what also caught my attention, just so you know what inspired this video, what inspired the small business bit to my practice as well, right? Because I don't only own a small business now, I also work a lot with other small business owners. So what inspired all this? The world of small, despite of course we all love big, flashy, things in daily life. I also noticed, as I was saying, along with the quality of training I could get in small settings and the way I could call my own shots in small settings down the road, I also noticed small business owners, I would see or have snippets of their conversations here and there, because I didn't know that many, financially successful people growing up. But people I would hear these snippets of, they had so much flexibility in their lives. They made, almost every time that I would hear the conversations, they made more money than those in more public positions, So for example, it's like, I remember when we were in high school in an accounting class, we had like the CEO of RBC come for a talk. And I remember that was a dream job for people at the time. They found out he made like $7 million a year, which obviously, on what planet would I say that that's a small amount of money? That's a lot of money. But then, when you dig deeper to what the surface information is that's presented to you, there are small business owners that can make a lot more than that. There are small business owners that are certainly worth more than that individual would be worth at the end of the day, owing to the fact that he's bringing income home as a salary that's going to come with crazy tax rates, things like that. So there's small business owners that would be able to, in some cases, put a lot more money in their pocket, despite even making less than that guy. I don't remember his name, just by virtue of, we're fed these examples, right? Nobody's going to go out there and research and be like, hey, there's also this going on. We're fed mainstream examples. That's how it has to go, because who has the time to feed you anything else? And, it's on us to dig a little below the surface. And every time I did, I found quite an advantageous setup to the small business route. So in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit, I think for all of the videos over the years at Graphene Business Law that I've put on YouTube on small business, I don't think I've ever once defined what small business is. So in this video, we're going to define small business, at least in Canada, or at least in general, big picture, and then talk about some of the benefits of having a small business, okay? So the definition, I mean, there are multiple resources that speak to the same definition, and the big picture goes as follows. When we're talking about employee size, so task force, a small business, you might be shocked, so get ready for it, because you might think of a small business as your like convenience store around the door where it's 2 people working around the clock. A small business can have up to 100 employees. And again, true to the creative style of small business, employees is different than independent contractors, it's different than freelancers. A small business can, have 1,000 freelancers feeding it content. But textbook-wise in Canada, we're usually looking at a conventional employee cap of 100 employees. That's a lot of friggin' employees. That, by the colloquial sense, would actually constitute a large business for a lot of people. So that's what I mean. There's more there than, meets the eye. Over time, there's been definitions created around micro business, and that one kind of makes me laugh because it sounds a little mousy, but micro business can have like 1 to 4 employees, and a small business can have 5 to 100. You'll see different blogs, different resources that speak to those definitions, but let's keep it clean on small business, focused on small business in this video. When it comes to income, the definitions on this really, really, really vary. They really vary. But on the lower, more conservative end of the spectrum, one could say that a small business is one that has a gross annual income of up to $5 million. It can be a lot more depending on the resources you read. It can be a lot more depending on the kind of accountant you have working for you, and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, 5 million is the number that we come across if you research different articles on the matter. Again, that is not an insubstantial amount of money. I know businesses that have hundreds of practitioners under their belt, but their employee task force might be only like 10, 20 people. So these are leading in businesses in their industries, but it's funny, they are small businesses. So these definitions are one thing, but what they actually mean and what they actually allow you to do are a whole other thing. When it comes to small business, another really impactful, there's very impactful statistics regarding what percentage of businesses in Canada, for example, are small businesses. This number is insane. There's a statistic out there that supports that 98% of Canadian businesses classify as small businesses. 98%. A more telling, reflective number as to what that number actually looks like in population is the task force number. There are statistics that support that 65 to 70% of the private labor force are employed through small business. So we're talking about like 7 out of 10 working adults, working grown-ups. I mean, I guess in some industries you can start when you're 16, so not quite grown-ups, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's a lot. It's a lot. And the number wouldn't be that high if the definitions of small business were not actually so not small after all. Okay. There are also dark statistics when it comes to the world of small business regarding small business failure rates and things like that, and I have a video focusing on just that I'll link up here below, up here as I'm talking. But as pertains to the technical definition of small business, that's what I wanted to put out there. I did some light research prior to starting this video as well on how the term even came about, because I remember from law school, sometimes we would have the weirdest terms and they would have really odd origins. Like I remember in securities law, not security like locking up your home, securities like stocks and trading, things like that, that there was a term that was tossed around, blue skies. And when you think securities, for a lot of us, given again with the mainstream media pushed down our throats, you might think Wall Street, things like that. If I remember correctly, and if you're free to double check me on this because of course I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, that term was originated from, or came from a businessman in Saskatchewan. Like it was not the setting you might think it is. But again, you dig a little deeper, you find out Saskatchewan is actually quite a sophisticated place for the practice of business and for entrepreneurs and things like that. So you always should dig a little deeper, and that's on you. Why? So what are the benefits of being in small business? If you have a really amazing vision, there are practitioners, there are business people out there that I engage with that intentionally, they could easily have a company with 500 people, with 5,000 people, but they intentionally preserve small business parameters. Why? There's obviously something in it for them, something that we're not being taught. And there are the obvious characteristics such as flexibility in your decision making as a business owner of a small business, whereas big businesses are going to come with all these boards and commissions and checks and balances and this and that. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, a lot of the time those structures are there to prevent abuse, and that's always a good thing, but they're not always that efficient. It can be a bad thing. It can be inhibitive to the business vision of a true leader and visionary. So there's an incentive to tuck it in under the small business parameters for you as a business owner there. Independence, I think that's kind of associated with flexibility. If you don't have independence, well, how can you practice, flexible decision making and things like that? You would be much more structured in your decision making, but still a separate benefit for what it's worth. Financial benefits, not just things like tax planning and things like that an accountant could help you with, but also loopholes. Small businesses can write off certain expenses. Small businesses can qualify for certain small business loans and grants. There are funding options available to small businesses that would look a little different for the bigger guys. I mean, the bigger guys arguably might not need to get so creative anyways, because if you are a company of 5,000 people, arguably there's some level of success there, some level of capital, sophistication there, so you could probably just walk into a bank and be able to receive the funding you're looking for. Whereas the small business guy, there's all this chicken and egg, right? It's not that more is available to you because you're lovely. It's that sometimes a small business guy has to get more creative in seeking funding. But again, keep in mind what small business guy really means. Small business guy can mean somebody, again, with 100 employees and 1,000 freelancers working for them. But for what it's worth, there are tax benefits to owning a small business as well. If any of these umbrella categories catch your attention, let me know down in the comments. I can make a separate video on that. I know if I go into each separate silo, as I call it out loud, this is going to be a 1-hour video, not a 10-15 minute video. So I'm trying to be efficient with time. There are advantages when it comes to control and ownership of the company. You are allowed to do different things and beat to a different beat of the drums when it comes to selling shares and selling ownership and making certain decisions as a small business owner. Whereas if you go into the big business world, especially if you go into the big business and public world, like listing your stocks on a public platform, for example, then you're susceptible to being taken over, you're susceptible to being under attack, you're susceptible to, your control and your leadership being scrutinized any and all times. Why not? There are obviously as well, not to make this sound, I feel like some of the advantages I've given are very nuanced and very, business savvy, because of course I'm a business practitioner, business law practitioner. But there's also advantages that come from the soul, or speak to the soul, if you will. If you're a small business owner, you can take the time to dive deeper into certain topics as opposed to just horizontally having all these different issues you're handling. So what do I mean? If you're a small business owner and you want to change direction of your company to better suit, the needs of your target demographic, you are more able to do that than a large business owner. Again, owing to all the things we've talked about. You have flexibility, independence, budgeting. There's less strings you have to go through to be able to, direct your own funding to what you're really looking to direct it towards and things like that. So there's also less boring benefits that come with being a small business owner. Again, including being able to direct your passions to whatever way you think would best suit your customers and would best speak to your product. I'll end this video there. Like I mentioned, I don't want it to be an hour-long video. One little bonus piece that I'll end the video with I did a little bit of research, and it said that, you know, because I was curious myself, so wait a second, okay, it's one thing to define the term, but where did it come from? I did some research because the business practice has been around for thousands of years. I mean, I remember learning in economics or finance and things like that, that bartering, for example, that was the way people did business a long time ago. It was the first way people did business, or at least the way they did business prior to coins and metals and what we might recognize today as money. And that bartering style of business practice is at least thousands of years old. And you can imagine back in the day, it would still have been primarily small business focused, you know? So where did this term come from? How long have we had this term? I was surprised to find quite a few articles overlapped in saying that the term small business is less than, you know, 100 to 150 years old, depending on the source you look at. So that, in the realm of thousands of years of human history, is a pretty recent term. That term, to give you perspective, it is more recent than some developments, you know, on the continent of North America that has started to happen early 1800s, mid 1800s, and so on and so forth. Even some periods in the late 1800s are earlier than 150, and certainly than 100 years old. I mean, 100 years old, we're like approaching the mid 1900s at that point, 1924, 1930, 1940, so on and so forth. So, and specifically, I found another resource that said that one of the first records of a small business organization came from the US in 1949. The National Federation of Small Business was created in the US in 1943. So I was surprised by that as well. It's quite a recent statistic. And obviously by that point, I mean, incorporation, case law and incorporation, and the importance of incorporating. I remember case law Solomon and Solomon from corporate law, first year of law school. I'm pretty sure that's an 1800s case. So we would have had not just small businesses in practice like we had thousands of years ago, but literally incorporated small businesses well prior to the establishment of small business organizations or federations, things like that. So that was a little interesting to me as well. And the creative part of my brain goes to thinking, well, there's still a lot of tweaking and growth and adapting of these terms we can do to fit anything we want to, really, because they are fairly recent. So now I'll end the video there. I hope you found this video educational, insightful. If you did, give us a big thumbs up. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. And if you are looking for any business law services, small business law services in the province of Ontario, Canada, we are able to help you with almost any request I can imagine you having here at Graphene Business Law. Feel free to email us, info@graphenebusinesslaw.ca, and our website, of course, is graphenebusinesslaw.ca. Thank you for watching.